There's a moment when time splits. You feel it in your bones before you can name it. Something shifts in the air. His voice, once warm like sunlight, now echoes cold across the distance. His messages arrive later. His presence fades like smoke. You sense him pulling away, not with anger but indifference. And that is what cuts the deepest. The silence between texts becomes a canyon. Your mind fills the void with questions, fears, memories. You scroll through old conversations, searching for the last place he looked at you like that. You wonder, did I say too much? Did I ask for too little? You begin to disappear inside yourself. This moment, small on the surface, seismic underneath, is not just about him leaving. It is the death of a future you once imagined, and in its place grows a desperate ache to get it back. What did I do wrong? How can I fix this? If I could just get one more chance. But here's the truth, it wasn't something you did. It was something you forgot. Yourself. The first thing most women do in this moment is the most natural and the most devastating. You reach out, you overcompensate, you try to hold on tighter, thinking that love will come back if you just show more of it. You send long texts, emotional, honest, pleading. You reread his messages like sacred scripture, analyzing the punctuation for proof that he still cares. You suggest meeting, talk about what went wrong, offer your heart like a peace treaty. You go from being magnetic to being a mirror, only reflecting his absence. Carl Jung wrote in Psychological Types, the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate. And this is why. The more unaware you are of the aching absence within, the more you chase its reflection in someone else. You think you're being vulnerable. But to him, it can feel like pressure. Like you're handing him the responsibility for your wholeness. You are not broken for wanting to reconnect. But the mistake is this, trying to recover a connection by proving your worth to someone who's already forgotten how to see it. This instinct to chase, to fix, to be enough again, it doesn't reawaken desire. It buries it. Because the more you seek him, the more he feels the weight of being your oxygen. And the male psyche does not crave survival, it craves pursuit. And so the distance grows. Not because you weren't lovable, but because you forgot the most magnetic thing you ever carried. Your absence. He doesn't even know why he's drifting, not consciously. You ask yourself how he could change so fast, why the man who once memorized the sound of your laughter now acts like it's noise in the background. But here is a truth buried beneath centuries of misunderstanding. Desire is not logical. It is primal, instinctive, mysterious. And in the male psyche, desire is sustained not by presence, but by polarity. The pull of difference, the electric space between self and other. Carl Jung, in Symbols of Transformation, wrote, "Without emotion, there is no transformation of darkness into light and of apathy into movement." Desire, then, is the spark of transformation. But it does not arise from comfort. It arises from emotional tension, from the mystery of what is not yet known. To understand male desire, you must understand the alchemy of distance, not the desperate kind, not the ache of dependence, but the sacred space between two souls where imagination is still alive. Men do not fall for what is explained to them. They fall for what is felt, yet never fully possessed. The more available you become, the less room he has to imagine you. And imagination, not comfort, is the gateway to longing. He doesn't chase what is handed to him. He chases what wakes the hunter in his unconscious. Imagine a rare flame in a dark forest. Not just any fire, your fire. It dances quietly, lighting its own circle of warmth. It does not call out, it simply is. A man who sees it feels two things at once, fascination and fear of losing it. That fear, that's the edge where desire is born. But when you run after him with your torch, trying to reignite what you think is fading, you reverse the current. You become the hunter, and he the prey. And he doesn't want to be caught, he wants to choose. Jung often spoke of the tension of opposites, the necessary dynamic between the masculine and feminine, between animus and anima. He wrote in Ion, "The self is a union of opposites par excellence." Masculine energy seeks polarity, a contrast that stirs motion. When you abandon your own center and rush toward him, the polarity collapses. You become sameness, not mystery. And sameness is the slow death of attraction. There is nothing more arresting to a man than a woman who chooses herself. Not as a tactic, not to provoke a reaction, but as a way of being. A woman who stands rooted in her own world, with sacred rituals, a quiet glow, a laugh that doesn't seek permission, shakes a man at his core, because she reminds him of something rare, a flame that cannot be owned. True feminine sovereignty is not about distance, it's about depth. She doesn't pull away to punish, she simply refuses to collapse into someone else. She is not waiting, she is not performing, she is becoming. She is the untouched jewel in the cave, the one every man secretly wishes to find, but only the worthy are willing to earn. He may not articulate it, but in his nervous system, he feels it. Over-availability feels safe, but unearned safety breeds indifference. What he doesn't have to work for, he eventually fails to see. He no longer feels the wild edge, the risk of loss, the pull that sharpens attention and deepens intention. This isn't about playing hard to get. This is about becoming hard to forget. You see, desire is paradox. It dies in possession, but it lives in the possibility. Carl Jung, in The Psychology of the Transference, wrote, "Where love reigns, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, there love is lacking. One is the shadow of the other." To love fully, there must be freedom. And that includes the freedom to miss someone, to long, to reach. But when there is no space to feel, there is no space to desire. He doesn't want to complete you. He wants to discover you. But if you reveal everything too soon, if your light becomes his flashlight, his compass, his air, you rob him of the journey. There must be shadows left unexplored, depths that are yours alone, corners of your soul that even you are still mapping. That is what keeps him circling your orbit, not because you begged, but because something about your stillness stirs his storm. When you disappear from his life to live your own, when you pour your gaze into your breath, your art, your sacred becoming, he feels it. Even if he can't name it, he feels it. And somewhere deep in the soil of his unconscious, a question begins to bloom. What did I lose when I lost her gaze? That question, not your pleading, not your performance, is what haunts him in the quiet. Not because you made him miss you, but because you became someone he no longer has access to. And in that void, desire returns. It creeps in like scent, not from absence rooted in pain, but from presence reclaimed in power. The woman who once gave everything now gives herself to her own life. And in that silent shift, the roles reverse. He becomes the one who checks his phone. He becomes the one replaying memories. He becomes the one feeling her absence like a song stuck in his chest. Why? Because you did the one thing he couldn't anticipate. You stopped chasing and started becoming. There's a sacred moment after the unraveling, after the tears have dried, after the nights you clutched your pillow like it could hold you together, after you've stared at your reflection wondering where she went. And then quietly, almost unnoticed, something shifts. It is not joy. Not yet. It is not confidence or closure or some profound revelation. It is something smaller, something holier, a pause. You wake up and don't check your phone first. You take a deeper breath. You choose tea over worry. You realize you haven't thought about him for a full 10 minutes, and in that space, you remember yourself. Carl Jung wrote in The Development of Personality, Collected Works, Vol. 17. Individuation means becoming an individual, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. And in this moment, you begin. Not by force, not by fixing, but by returning. To the woman you were before the begging, before the grasping, before you thought his love validated your worth. You begin to reclaim your center, not as a performance, but as a sacred act of self-rescue. This is where the real magic begins. Because the world taught you that power comes from control, from doing more, from proving you're enough. But feminine power? Feminine power is silence with a spine. It is withdrawal not as punishment but as protection. It is detachment, not from coldness, but from clarity. This is the essence of strategic silence, not the silence of manipulation, not the petty withholding of affection to provoke a reaction. No, this is the silence of becoming unavailable to what diminishes you. It's the silence of a woman who finally realizes, if I have to beg to be seen, then I am in the wrong room. This silence is sacred. It's where you stop bleeding energy into someone who's already made his choice, and you begin pouring that energy into the one person who never stopped needing you, yourself. You light the candles again, not to impress, but to remember. You move your body, not to attract him, but to feel the rhythm of your own aliveness. You dress not to seduce, but to mirror the woman you forgot you were. And slowly, in tiny, defiant acts of devotion, you come home. You stop texting, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about preserving what is still sacred within you. You stop checking his social media, not because you're over him, but because you're choosing peace over poison. You stop waiting, not because you gave up on love, but because you remembered that love begins with you. Carl Jung, in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And that's what this is, an awakening. You no longer search for signs in his silences, you start reading the signs in your own soul. You realize that loving someone doesn't mean abandoning yourself. You can long for him and still walk away. You can miss him and still choose silence. You can ache and still rise. This is the difference between love and need. Love is generous, need is hungry. And you, beloved, are not here to feed anyone who cannot nourish you in return. So you reclaim your energy, like a queen returning to her throne. You create again, write, dance, work, breathe. You stop performing love and start embodying it. You become the flower that does not chase the bee. You simply bloom, and in blooming you become undeniable. You become the rare jewel buried deep within a mountain, not because you're hiding, but because your soul now requires effort to reach. And only the worthy will make that climb. Here's what you must know. Men feel energy long before they understand it. They may not have words for it, but they feel when your energy shifts. When your gaze no longer scans the room for them. When your laughter is no longer punctuated by hope. When your absence is not a game, but a mirror. That's when he begins to remember, not the you who waited, but the you who walked away, gracefully, without slamming the door. And if he returns, he does not return to the same woman. He returns to someone who no longer needs him to validate her existence. Because you now know, your power is not in being chosen, it is in choosing yourself. And this is where everything changes, not just how he sees you, but how you see yourself. You are no longer the woman who begs. You are the woman who blesses with her presence and withdraws it with quiet strength. You are the woman whose heart remains open, but whose boundaries are now sacred ground. You are the storm he cannot predict, the fire he cannot tame, the ocean that no container can hold. You are the woman who does not chase. You attract, filter, invite, release. This is the paradox of power. The less you need, the more you magnetize. And when your energy stops trying to grasp what's leaving, you begin to radiate what draws everything worthy to you. Because self-love is not just a concept, it is a frequency. It speaks louder than any words, echoes deeper than any silence. And in this new frequency, you don't just get him back, you get yourself back, and that is everything. It begins in the quietest moments, when the phone doesn't buzz, when the night feels too wide, when you stare at the screen, not because he's written, but because he hasn't. This is the spiral. It doesn't crash in like a wave, it drips like a leaky faucet in the soul. You try to distract yourself, but everything reminds you of him. The coffee he used to drink, the song you once danced to, the space on the pillow that still holds his shape. And then the thoughts begin. Maybe I was too much, maybe I wasn't enough. If I just said it differently, if I hadn't asked that question, if I'd waited 5 more minutes before replying. This is the internal storm. The loop of self-blame disguised as self-analysis. The emotional spiral that masquerades as insight but is in truth self-abandonment. You replay conversations with forensic precision, looking for the moment it all cracked. You assign meaning to his silences, as though decoding them could rewind time. You oscillate between anger and yearning, hope and despair. Carl Jung wrote in Psychological Types, the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate. And that's exactly what this spiral is. A projection. A battle between the stories you replay in your mind and the truths you've yet to meet in your soul. You think you're trying to win him back. But what you're really doing is trying to win yourself back through his validation, through his return. Because some part of you still believes, if he comes back, it means I was lovable all along. This is the most seductive illusion, that healing lives in his words. That closure comes from his apology, that your worth is something he holds, like a verdict you're still waiting to hear. And so, without realizing it, you start to vanish. You stop eating the way you used to. You stop laughing like you mean it. You stop showing up, not just for others, but for yourself. And the spiral tightens. You check his status, then check again. You draft messages you never send. You try to stay cool, but your chest is a dam of unshed ache. This spiral is not weakness. It is not madness. It is the soul's desperate attempt to anchor itself in a reality that no longer exists. But the tragedy is this: the more you try to make sense of him, the more you lose touch with you. You become the ghost in your own life. Present but not living, breathing but not being. And yet, here lies the turn. Because the spiral, though painful, is sacred. It reveals something essential. That the most desperate hunger you're feeling is not for him. It is for the part of you handed over when you thought love had to be earned. Carl Jung wrote in the Red Book, "The acceptance of the least, the poorest, and most impudent parts of me, this is the beginning of my love for myself." This is where true healing begins, not in escaping the spiral, but in listening to it. Instead of asking, "How do I make him love me again?" you ask, "What part of me still believes I'm unworthy without him?" Instead of asking, "How do I get him to respond?" you ask, "Why does my peace depend on his attention?" You stop resisting the spiral and start witnessing it. You begin to see that the ache isn't a call to act, it's a call to listen. To the part of you that was once taught love must be performed. To the younger self who equated silence with rejection. To the quiet voice inside who just wants to be held by you. This part of you is not broken. She is the child who once stood in the shadow of someone's absence and asked, "What did I do wrong?" And now, as the woman you are today, you do something no one else ever did. You stay with her, not to fix, not to silence, but to witness, to hold, to love, fiercely, completely, without condition. This is where the spiral begins to loosen, not because the pain leaves, but because you stop leaving yourself in the pain. You stop trying to escape it through someone else. You begin to understand that healing is not about erasing emotion, it's about remaining intact in the presence of it. You walk through your home like a woman who remembers it is sacred ground. You light candles, not for romance, but for ritual. You journal, not to solve him, but to see you again. You cry, not because you're begging, but because something old is breaking open. And something new is arriving. And in that moment between sob and silence, you understand, he was never your home. You were. And you had left yourself for far too long, hoping he'd bring you back. But now, you are the one walking yourself home, step by step, breath by breath, word by word, until one day you look in the mirror and no longer see a woman waiting to be rescued. You see the woman who did the rescuing, not shattered, not lost, but rebuilt, from ache, from ashes, from the spiral that didn't destroy her, but revealed her. You rise, not because the spiral ends, but because you no longer let it drag you away from your own reflection. And that, beloved, is the beginning of everything. There is a woman inside you that you haven't met yet. She's not the one who waited by the phone, not the one who cried into the silence, not the one who made herself smaller just to fit into the space he gave her. No, this woman is different. She is not born from his return. She is born from your return to yourself. You begin to meet her the moment you stop explaining your worth. The moment you sit in the stillness and say, "I don't need to be chosen to feel whole." Carl Jung wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life." This woman, this new you, is not a performance. She is the outcome of everything you've survived, the nights you endured, the fears you faced, the heartbreaks that broke you open instead of breaking you down. She is not bitter, she is not cold, she is clear. She walks differently, not with arrogance, but with unapologetic ownership. She knows now that love is not measured by sacrifice, and connection should never come at the cost of your essence. She no longer asks, "Am I too much?" She asks, "Is this space big enough to hold who I've become?" You don't abandon softness to protect yourself. You infuse it with discernment. You don't close your heart. You wrap it in boundaries made of velvet and steel. You don't need a spotlight, you are the fire. And those who cannot hold their hand to it without flinching were never meant to stand beside you. Your power is not loud, it radiates, like the moon, distant, magnetic, serene, like the ocean, calm on the surface, but unfathomably deep, like the flower, blooming not for attention, but because blooming is her nature. You are no longer the echo of someone else's validation. You are the voice that no longer waits for permission to sing. And what's extraordinary is this. The moment you stop needing to be chosen, you become unforgettable, because you are no longer a role in someone else's play. You are your own story, written in your own ink, on pages no one else can edit. This is what happens when a woman stops orbiting another's gravity and becomes her own sun. Men will feel this, not because you try to make them feel it, but because energy doesn't lie. He will sense it in the way you don't rush to respond, in the way your silence is no longer anxious, it's sovereign. He'll notice it in your smile. Not the one that begs for approval, but the one that says, I belong to myself now. And when he reaches out, if he does, he won't find the same woman who once waited. He will find the woman who grew in his absence. The woman who faced herself in the mirror and said, I choose you, long before anyone else did. And that choice changed everything. You now attract differently, not through pursuit, but through presence. Your standards are no longer negotiable, not because you're demanding, but because you've tasted the peace of living in integrity with your soul. You don't offer your time to those who only want your body. You don't dim your light for someone afraid of brightness. You don't explain your boundaries like apologies. You honor them like sacred lines drawn in gold. Carl Jung wrote in The Development of Personality, individuation means becoming an individual and implies becoming one's own self. And this is who you are now. A woman who knows her worth even when no one is watching. A woman who can miss someone and still not call. A woman who can desire connection but never at the expense of her dignity. You are the storm and the shelter, the flame and the calm, the mirror and the mystery. And it is this paradox, this wholeness, that makes you magnetic. You no longer tolerate love that exhausts you. You seek what expands you, what nourishes your roots and fuels your fire. And you understand something few ever do. True power is not in being needed. It is in being undeniably whole. You don't offer your love as bait. You offer it as a blessing to the few who can hold it with reverence. And to the rest, you offer silence, not in bitterness, but in liberation. Because your energy is no longer up for consumption by those who do not feed it in return. You are not here to compete for attention. You are here to command it, simply by being. Not every man will rise to meet this version of you. That's the point. You are no longer available to those who require your diminishment in order to love you. Because the woman you've become, she is a constellation. She does not beg to be seen, she shines. And only those with the courage to look up and the depth to stay grounded will ever stand beside her. You are not the same, and you never will be. And that is the most beautiful thing of all. And if he returns, if the silence finally echoes back with his name, if his footsteps find the path back to your door, he will not find the woman he once left behind. He will find someone reborn. A woman who no longer waits to be chosen because she has already chosen herself. He may still be drawn to your beauty, but it will be your stillness, your depth, your unshakable self-love that shakes him awake. He will feel the difference, because you no longer offer your heart as a question. You offer it as a gift to be earned, not assumed. And if he does not return, then you will finally understand. The prize was never his presence. The prize was your return to your own soul. You walked through the fire. You held your own hand in the dark. You became the woman who no longer begs, pleads, or proves. You became the woman who attracts, who chooses, who stands. Carl Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But you faced yours. You didn't run. You didn't numb. You didn't wait to be rescued. You looked inward. You found the voice beneath the echo. And now you know, you are not here to be chosen. You are here to choose yourself.